In lesson 17, we're going to start to have a look at 3D shapes in Wysiwyg. There's a lot of tools we can use. It only looks like 5 or 6 different types of shapes, but we can do a lot with them when we start to extrude them and extract from them. So there's a whole toolbar we're going to quickly look at that's going to show us how we can manipulate 3D shapes. So it's lesson 17 and we're going to look at 3D shapes. First thing I want to point out is that I would always build off of the 2D plan, but just so we can demonstrate how some of these 3D tools work, I'm just going to show you through the editor here. We're going to look at this toolbar. It's the shapes panel. We've got surfaces, riser, which if you'd use 3D models or 3D modeling programs elsewhere, that'd be a box, cylinders, cones, spheres, and walls, which are also a box. We're going to come to the library tool later, but I want to start off with just the surface. A surface is a box that's only got one plane. So I'm going to select a surface. I'm going to click with my snap tool, make sure endpoints are on, and I'm going to select from that corner. I'm going to click snap down here and make sure that stays on, because it keeps turning off. But I'm going to turn off these ones. Just make sure it's just that one. So hopefully that'll stay on now. So I'm going to click to that edge, to this edge, and then this edge here. That's my floor area. Now you see it's trying to put another point in there. I'm just going to right click, finish surface. It looks exactly the same as a rectangle tool we did earlier, but if we jump over to our shaded view, which we haven't covered yet, but it's a way of looking at how something looks in 3D with all of the shading on it. That's why it's called shaded view. You can see we've now added this grey floor. Now some of this is actually coming from AutoCAD. It's already got the borders in 3D and the set and this show floor, but the grey bit we just put in is what we've just drawn with the plane. Now it's very significant because it's flat, completely flat. There's no depth to it at all, which means it's only got 2 polygons. In 3D modeling terms, 4 edges equals 2 triangles. So you draw a line that way, or you could draw it that way. It's ambiguous which way around it actually goes. Is rendering those 3 lines to make one surface, and then along here and down the middle to make another one. It's called a trie. A lot of modelling programs are actually working quads, which is 4 edges, and it renders a trie automatically, and then it tries to guess which wants your line to be, which direction it goes in. So that's a whole nother lesson in 3D Max maybe. But a 2D plane literally just has those 2 polygons, so it's the smallest physical shape you can have in a 3D modelling program is a triangle, and a square is the second smallest with 2 triangles. Once you get into a box, you've got 6 sides. So you see this object here has 6 sides. You've got a top, shaped slightly differently. Suddenly we've got 1, 2 on each side. So it's actually 12 polygons in the box as opposed to 2. So planes are quite nice to work with. They're quite simple. We'll talk about that more later when we start looking at 3D Max stuff. Let's jump back to wireframe. Now obviously our borders have already been built here, but I want to demonstrate how this would work if we were doing it from scratch in Wysiwyg. So I'm going to take one of our borders here. Let's pretend that's just a 2D line. It looks like a 2D line there. I'm going to select our wall tool. Wall is effectively a box that's upright. The difference between a wall and a riser is just what it calls these words: width, height, and thickness. In the other case, it's that the height is as a priority because you're trying to set the height of the rostra. So you can type these in if you know exactly how big you want something to be. If you want it to be 5 meters wide by ½ meter thick, you could do that. I prefer to select interactive. I always do for everything I do. And I'll make sure my grid snap's turned off, end snap's turned on, and I'm just going to click. Oh, it snaps it down there. Well, that wasn't the plan at all. I'm going to click escape and try that again. Because my snap tools have been a bit fussy at the moment. So I'm going to choose my wall tool again. I'm going to choose interactive, and I'm going to click first corner of one wall. I want to be there. There we go. And now I can click and drag it out. Second corner is here. Now I've done that wrong actually, because I should have started on that corner. So I'm going to place it there, and now it's going to ask me for the height. I'm going to type in, I don't know what the height is. I need to find out what the height is. So for that I need my section in CAD. So I'm just going to load that up. And because I want to make sure I get this right, bear with me. Section. So I've also drawn a section that goes with my CAD plan. I'll drag it in from AutoCAD. Just wait for it to load. So this is my section. I always draw a section. It's really important to know what everything works, how everything works in the side view, because you can see how your lights fit versus the borders. This obviously being the front of the stage. That's my front of house truss. And if I just type in DI in AutoCAD, oh, that didn't work, DI, I can just click from here. In fact, you can see what it's going to be because I've already annotated it. I'm going to drag down to the floor, select the top of the floor, that's the most accurate way you can be. And you see it's 9,000, which actually keeps, it's trying to snap to something, so it's telling me it's 8,917, but you come back up here, we can see it does say 9,000, that's what we set that to. So it's a 9 meter high leg. So I'm going to type in a height of 9. The thickness always has to be at least 0.5 meters. That's absolutely arbitrary. It's something that I've set. It's because in the older version of ESP Vision, before Vectorworks bought it, you could set the depth that you could render to, and you could actually pass light through an object if it was too thin, and 0.5 meters became the perfect space where you could have a scenery that stopped light from passing through it and still looks solid the rest of the time when light wasn't passing through it, and you didn't get this moiring effect. So really it's just ancient history for me, but I quite like 0.5 as being a depth of a drape, because it's it feels like, when I said, I meant 0.05, 5 centimeters, so in meters, so that is 5 centimeters, which is about the width of a drape anyway. So I click OK, and you can see it's a little bit smaller than the one I've drawn. Now it's in the wrong place, so this gives an opportunity to use the move tool. So edit, move. I'm just going to click from this point to this point. Oh, why did it do that? It's trying to snap in all sorts of weird ways. Edit, move. Click from that point to this point. Go on. Go on, you know you want to. There we go. Might have not done it actually. We can also click and drag it by selecting the edge and just moving it around manually. And actually that looks like it's trying to snap. We can actually see where it's trying to go to then. It's got more of that sort of magnetic lock feature if you do that. Oh, and it's moved over there again. Let's just click and drag it back over here. The fun, you can start to see now why I end up drawing everything in CAD and importing it. So I'm going to leave it there. That's going to do for now. If I go into, if that's wrong, I'll delete the original border because it's going to ruin my example here. So we don't have that original border we saw, we just have this block. If we go back into shaded view, we should see our border. Let's give it a moment to load. There we are, and that's 9 meters. That's gone quite a lot higher than my other one. That's actually the height we went to. So obviously when I drew these were wrong. That's interesting in itself that we can use this as an opportunity to test how big things are. So there we go. Now there's a couple other ways of drawing these, which is much easier to work with. So for instance, we've done wall, we can also do a riser. It works exactly the same way. I can use interactive. This time it's width, depth and height. All it's done is just swap the height and the depth around. Rather than using the word thickness, it's using the word depth. So it's not really changing very much. But I'm going to go to interactive. I'm going to go up to this border here. And again, I'm going to use my snap tool and click from that edge to this edge. Oh, come on. It's been really fussy because it keeps seeing other things to snap to. Let's try to turn off a couple of these other snaps. Just stick with the end point. Does it work? No. Let's try this one. No, not having that either. What about this one? Intersection snap. No. Or we could turn the snap off altogether and we can just place it using our eyeballs, which isn't good practice, I know, but this is what you're working with sometimes. So we can set that to 9 meters height, 9 for 9 meters. Okay, and now if we go to shaded view, we'll see we've got, oh, let's delete the red one just so we can see it clearly. Shaded view. Give it a moment. And there's our second border. Looks exactly the same. So one is a wall, the other one's a visor, but you can see the result exactly the same. And there's a third way of doing this as well we're going to go to. Hopefully this will work a bit better with the snapping than the other two. So I'm going to take this border here. I'll tell you one of the problems actually is because these are probably three-dimensional lines, it's probably trying to snap to a part of the model that's in the third dimension. That could be why it's not working. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and I'm not going to set a length or a width. I'm just going to hit interactive. Now there's an option here to convert this to surface. We could do this now. We're going to do this in a moment, but just so we can go for that exercise, I'm not going to select this, but just so you know, if we click this now, we won't have to do the next step, but I want to talk us through it so we can see it happening. So I'm going to click the corner, and now I'm going to click the other corner, and this is just building a rectangle. Yep, it's trying to do the funny snapping again. So I'm going to turn my snap off because I find that rather boring. So I'm going to get as close as I can. I'm going to zoom right in. Just use what you call eyeball it, which isn't good practice. I apologise. You should always try to snap. But if I'm honest, it happens a lot. And one thing you've got to ask yourself is, will the crew get it as close to that when it flies in as we're doing it now? Obviously, you want to be as accurate as possible, but sometimes you just got to be realistic as well. It's not that accurate in real life. So now I've built a rectangle. That's, if I go to shader view now, it's just going to look like a square on the floor. And in fact, just to prove the point, I'm going to delete my red line, so we've just got a square, and I'm going to go to quad view, which will help us see what's going on here. The quad view will give us 4 windows. We can look at this later, but you've got a plus button there. You can select your own layouts of windows if you wanted to. So now we have the option of having the shader view at the same time as the plan view. So you can see that there, somewhere under there, is our new rectangle. It's going to pop up in a minute. We've got a nice section view there, so we can see where the red line there is the border on the leg on the other side of the stage. And here in the front view, we can see the 2 we've done. And over here, we can get back to our front view where we can get to our new border, which is there. So where it helps if things are different colours. Now, I said to you earlier that we had the option of converting this to a surface. We can do that now by going to Tools, Convert Rectangles into Surfaces. Now, you see, you've got other options here, rectangles into pipes. We're going to cover that when we get to doing the lighting later. But you can just turn those lines into something you can hang a light on if you wanted to. But we're going to go with rectangles into surfaces. So that's now a solid object, a plane, just like this object up here that we created earlier for the floor. That's exactly the same now. It's turned it into a plane. So if you built a plane, you can now take the next step in exactly the same way as we're about to do with this rectangle. Go convert again. I haven't deselected it. See, I've noticed that I've deliberately not clicked off. For that. It's still selected. Go Tools, Convert. Ooh, Extrude. That's rather not convert. Extrude surfaces into solids. So this basically adds the 3rd dimension to it. It takes it up into the air. So if I click this, it gives us another dialog box. Set the height. The height is 9 meters. Click OK, and there you can see there's another border. I prefer to work this way. This is how I like to work because you have control over every element of it, and you don't get any of these weird dialog boxes asking you for lots of different dimensions. You draw exactly what you want. Now, this probably isn't going to work because it didn't work for me earlier, but if I take my spline tool here, and I'm just going to demonstrate by drawing off the sides here a little shape. If I double click, maybe, ooh, no, it hasn't done that. Right click, finish spline. Now I'm going to go Tools, Convert Lines into Surfaces. It's now turned that into, well, that's why, yes, Wysiwyg doesn't like turning splines into 3D objects. So it's closed it for me. You see there? It's closed that line up. But it's taken away the spline edges. This is another reason why I do it in another program. There it is there, that's my surface. Just if I just undo that, you can see it was a circle. Select it again. Tools, Convert Lines into Surfaces. Convert it into that shape. Incidentally, if you want to make it more smooth, you can just put more points in. You know, just lots and lots of points, makes it smoother. It's the same, it's exactly what the render is doing when it's creating splines normally. It's just putting loads of points in. And then we can go to Extrude Surfaces into Solids, and let's make that, no, leave it at 3 meters. There you go. So if you want to do some complicated shapes, you might work that way. Where this is quite useful is we don't have a venue at the moment, so we could build a 3D venue. Let's go back into CAD view. Incidentally, if you're clicked in the shaded view, all of this is grayed out. You can't draw anything in shaded view. You have to be in one of the CAD views. So if you're wondering why everything's grayed out, that's why. So I'm going to create my spline. I'm going to create a really weird shape venue. It goes a bit like this. Right, okay, let's just say that's my venue. right click, finish spline, got a really weird shape. Tools, convert lines into surfaces, turns it into something square. Tools, extrude, surfaces into solids, 3 meters, and it's got a venue now. Now if I zoom right in, it's a bit weird. I'll show you a bit more about mouse tools in a second because it's hard to do. But now you can see we're actually inside that venue. It's got walls around the outside. There's another thing we can do. If we undo this, Control Z a few times, I've got my line around the outside. I'm going to click to extrude without converting it to a solid first. I'm going to go straight to extrude, lines into surfaces. And it's going to ask me for a height and number of points. Now I was saying to you, the more points you put in, the more detailed the curve is. In this case, it's going to put 10 points. So this entire line that I've made around here is going to have 10 points in total. And I'm going to go a little bit higher this time. I'll make it 9 meters tall with 10 points. And you can see now it's just created a nice wall around the outside. Let's try it again, but this time let's put more points in and see how that looks. So I'm going to go to Tools, Extrude, Lines into Surfaces. I'm going to go for 100 points and make it 9 meters tall. Click OK and see how much smoother that is. So that's how you start to get your smooth edges. But you are now creating quite a lot of polygons. Every single one of those facets that you can see is a plane with 2 triangles on it. So that means we've got 200 triangles that have been rendered. See how quickly it adds up. Now actually what I would like to do with this venue is not to use a curved spline at all, so I'm going to delete that. I would like to do this with a straight spline, so I'm going to actually turn this to a line tool. I'm going to click, I'll get my snap turned on again, click from that edge. Oh, let's double click on snap down here because it keeps turning off. Well, sometimes when you select it up here, it'll only do it for the next command and then it'll turn it off again, unless you double click down at this end. So it's going to go right on the outside of the venue here. This is actually the wall where the counterweight frame is and the dock doors on the other side. Now I could go across here and create the walls for the proscenium, but actually I'm going to find that a bit annoying initially because it's going to get in the way. So I'm just going to go right click, finish line. I've now got a line around the outside. It looks exactly the same in the model because it's on top, exactly on top of the old line. So I'm just going to make sure that stays selected. I'm not going to deselect it. Tools, extrude, lines into surfaces. Actually, the venue is about 20 meters, at least 20 meters high. So I'm just going to click 20 meters. And there we go. I've now got the outside of my venue, which is quite useful if you want to create a full blackout. You might never use that. I'd actually put that on another layer. So while it's still selected, I'm just going to create a new layer. Call it v_venue wall. I tend to call anything that's permanent for the venue, I'll put a V in front of it. As I said in the previous chapter about layers, this is a hang up for me. Back from before we had the grouping feature that came out a few releases ago, I used to group everything by the prefix. I still do it because it's quite useful to just know where what the group's meant to be, where it all sits. If you move something out, just nice to look at everything, see it all organised. So having created that layer, it hasn't automatically added this line to that layer. You then have to right click, go to properties, wait for a window to come up. I now have to select the venue wall and then click apply or OK, and that's now moved that over there. So if I turn that layer off, it's gone. Now the other thing I could do, just to complete this chapter or this lesson on 3D models. Now I showed you how to do the wall or the riser rather than create a box. What you could also do, if you wanted to create the proscenium opening, is I could create a rectangle that goes, choose interactive, it's going to go all the way around the outside of the stage. So I'm going to create a box that goes all the way around the outside. I'm going to extrude that, rectangles into surfaces. I'm going to extrude it by 25 meters. So I've got a giant box now, just zoom out of here. There you go, that's a fly tower effectively. It's got a roof. In fact, it hasn't got a roof. What it's done is because it was a rectangle, it's extruded the side straight out, which is fine because it means we can see inside. But now I want my proscenium opening. So what I might do is create another box. So I'll get my rectangle tool again. Interactive. I'm going to draw, and I need to draw this so it goes across this line. I want to basically put one box inside another, and I'm going to cut it out. So I'm going to click in, try and find a point because it's trying to snap all the way across here like this to that edge, which is my proscenium opening. So this is actually like a sound position here. You see the proscenium, actually you can see these lines, the proscenium arch goes from here to here. You can open and close it, make it larger and smaller. So I'm going to go all the way to the outside there, just in case. I've now created that rectangle. I'm going to go Tools, Extrude, Rectangles into Surfaces. In fact, that's a lie, I'm not going to do that. I don't want a surface. I need to make it into a solid. So I need to go Rectangles into Surfaces first by converting it, and then extrude my surface. Remember, the difference between the two is that in the first instance I was going to just extrude the lines out to make walls. If you convert it to a surface and then extrude the surface, you get a solid, which is a full 3D object. So the height's a proscenium arch, so I'm going to have to drag my CAD model in to get that information. So that's the top of my proscenium arch there. That's what that is, my first border. So I'm just going to measure from here down to that line, and it is 8.789. Probably not exactly that, but we'll use that. So 8.789 meters, and that's my box. That's going to be my proscenium arch. You can see it there in the section, you see it sticking out. Now what I need to do is take one away from the other, so we can use a Boolean tool. So this is where it gets quite complicated, because now I've got loads of lines on top of each other. I can't select one easily without selecting the other. Now, I mean, I can actually select it here, but I want to demonstrate something else. If you click on one of these views, one that's not so useful to you, let's take this front view for a moment. There's another view there we haven't looked at, which is the isometrics view. If I click on here, I now get a nice 3D view where it works like a CAD mode. So if I click on the shaded view here, I lose my toolbars, but in the isometrics view I still have the toolbars. If you hold down Control and use the arrow keys, you can rotate it up and down. You can actually make it into a top view just by going all the way up. Oh, that's interesting. It's not letting you do that anymore. You used to let you do that. So I'm going to go around, get into a nice view. I can now see my two boxes quite clearly. That's one, that's the other. So I'm going to select one and the other. I'm going to go to Tools, and then I've got my Boolean operations. Oh, might select one at a time. Select my outside one. Tools. A Boolean is something you can select and subtract from something else. And tell you what, it's not letting me do it because I made it a surface, not a it's just a surface, not a full solid object. So I'm actually going to have to start this again. I'm going to delete this and make it again with a solid, just like I did with the box in the front here. So you can't extract a surface away from so you can't extract from a surface because it's a series of planes. So I'm just going to draw this rectangle again. Tools, convert rectangles into surfaces, and then I'm going to convert the surface by extruding it into a solid. Make that 25 meters. So the difference again, just to reiterate this because it's really important, so this has now got a roof. What I did before is I extruded a line, 4 lines made 4 walls. It wasn't a solid object. This is a solid. It's got 6 sides to it and it thinks it's a full solid object. So now I've got that selected, I can go to Tools, Boolean Operations. Still not letting me do it if I select both of them. Tools, Boolean Operations, subtract, no. Tools, Boolean Operations, subtract objects. Aha, select line, select the set of objects, subtract. There's one, there's the other. Right click to finish. No, won't let me do it. Okay, we'll come back to that later, try and figure out why it's not working.